back to my channel. In this true crimes behind the story plots of American Horror Story, I'm starting out with the Cecil Hotel. I've known about the sort of mysteries and murders and situations going on in the Cecil Hotel for a number of years. I've been very interested and intrigued by it. When I was doing research for this particular video, I just could not believe how much has occurred there. You almost want to be like, why would you ever go there? Of course, you have people who are really into like ghost hunting and things, and you know, they would be attracted. But outside of that, I just don't. I don't know how the Cecil Hotel can get past the stigma of like what's gone on. Without further ado, let's get started in diving deep into the history and the crimes related to the Cecil Hotel. So the Cecil Hotel is located in LA. It was constructed in 1924 by hotelier, I believe it's hotelier, William Banks Hanner. And I'm sorry if I'm looking down at my notes. Some of these cases I know really well. Others I know the basics, but I want to get you like the in-depth information. So if I'm looking down a little bit, it's because I'm looking at my notes, and I'm sure I'll get better at that. Initially, when the Cecil was built, it was meant to be sort of the hotel for people who are like business people, tourists, just traveling. It was done in that beautiful like Art Deco style that was really popular in that time period. It was originally a 700 guest room hotel. Since then, it has been not only renovated, but it's also been rebranded. As we get into this video, you'll probably see why. Currently, it has, I believe, 600 rooms that are rentable rooms, and it's called the Stay on Main, and that happened in 2011. In 2017, it was voted a historical monument. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I do think it means, like, for instance, like some of the changes that are made have to be like approved, I believe, don't quote me. But I also think that saves it in some certain situations. I get the artistic part of it and, you know, the beautiful architecture, but given some of the things that have happened there, I'm just really surprised that, you know, somebody wanted to make it a historical monument. But I don't really know much about that, so if you know much about that, like, give me a comment below. I'm just curious as to how that even occurs and happens and things like that. This hotel was featured loosely as part of the plot for American Horror Story Hotel. So if you haven't seen that, after you watch this video, you might want to check that out. I think you can get it on like Netflix or Hulu or whatever. The hotel cost $1 million at the time to complete, but unfortunately within 5 years, the Great Depression had occurred, so the Cecil took a hit just like every other place and person took a hit during that time. It was able to sort of flourish through the 1940s, but it just never really could recover the Great Depression, and so it just began to see like pretty rapid decline. Part of the decline of the Cecil Hotel was based on its location. I'm going to assume that the location that was chosen, especially because it was supposed to be for like business and touristship, was chosen because of that, but that was also part of its decline because it's located next to an area called Skid Row, which is an area of LA that is known for homelessness and transients. By the 1950s, the hotel gained a reputation that the people that lived there were also sort of transients and people maybe with less favorable intentions. Beginning in the 1930s, suicides and other violent crimes just seem to plague the Cecil Hotel. And nobody really knows if it was like the location or just maybe, you know, it could have been that perfect storm of the location, the fact that a lot of the population was transient, was homeless. That brings on so many other challenges, like monetarily. There can be mental health issue challenges. There can be other types of situations, drug use, things like that, that can cause you to be transient, can cause you to be homeless. And so all of that, plus you had, you know, just the country in general was just struggling overall to ever come back from things that happened during the Depression. Then you have this area of LA that is just known for crime. It just seemed like as things happened there, then more people who were attracted to that type of thing went there. So for instance, in 1931, the very first suicide that was reported at the Cecil Hotel occurred. And then it seemed like the more and more that suicides happened there, the more and more people went there to commit suicide, which then like just made the whole situation worse. In the next 2 decades, suicides there became so prevalent that the residents that lived there actually used to call, instead of the Cecil, they would call it the suicide. That's how, and that's just like reported. You know that there's things that happen that people don't report, especially, you know, if you're living at the Cecil and you're living a lifestyle that you're maybe not really proud of. I can imagine there were so many crimes there that just weren't even reported. So I found this really interesting. The word Cecil actually means invisible. And when we get down to like all the different things that have happened there, it's really intriguing that the name of the hotel is invisible and all of these things occurred there. Outside of the suicide reputation, the Cecil also had a huge reputation for other activities, various violence, drug activity, adultery, prostitution. This is going to come into play in some of the other cases that we're going to talk about related to the suicide, or to this, oh my gosh, see, I called it the suicide, related to the Cecil. Many people currently believe that the Cecil is haunted, which after everything we talk about, you might believe that too. And it is one of the locations for people who are seeking out paranormal experiences, and many people have said that they have witnessed various paranormal activity there. In March of 1937, 25-year-old Gracie Margot reportedly attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the 9th floor. Unfortunately, she did not make it to the ground. She actually landed on the telephone wires that went from the Cecil to the next building. I believe they were telephone wires. They could have been other types of wires, utility wires. She was able to be rescued off the wires and transported to the hospital. Unfortunately, she did die in the hospital from her injuries. The challenging part of this in terms of, there are some people that believe that this was actually not a suicide. She shared a room at the time with a sailor. His name was M.W. Madison. In the research that I did, they didn't give like a full name. He couldn't explain how she had come to, quote unquote, fall out of the window. Because of this, the police couldn't determine whether this was an accident, whether this was a suicide, or whether this was a homicide. So he was never charged with anything. It was just sort of curious that he referred to it as her falling out of the window, but that he didn't know how she fell out of the window. That remains a mystery as to how exactly she came to be out of that window. Another woman who was known to be attempting suicide, her name was Helen Gurney. On October 23rd of 1954, she jumped out of the 7th floor window, but unfortunately she actually landed on the hotel's marquee and did not hit the ground. There was a witness that saw her jump, saw her hit the marquee, and pass away. He was actually taken to the hospital and he went into shock from seeing that. I can't even imagine in general, like when I see even a deer that has been hit, it tears me up. Like I cry over that. I can't even imagine what it would do to my psyche if I saw a woman perish right in front of me, and especially with something like suicide, where we know that, you know, again, it's not always easy. I don't speak about this topic lightly. For the lows that we can get to, we can recover. And that's the wonderful thing about being human, is we can persevere. Sometimes it can seem so deep that we don't know how to get out of it. But there are people and places and services that can really help that. That's just a message I hope everybody gets. Her room was room number 704, and people who are into ghost hunting, that's a very popular room, and it has been said that people have experienced paranormal activity related to her death in that room. So I'm going to touch on the death of Elizabeth Short. I'm going to have a whole other video on that, and that'll be coming up actually next after this one. Her situation was featured in American Horror Story. The reason that she is in the Cecil Hotel video is because it was reported that Elizabeth Short was seen drinking at the Cecil Hotel either somewhere around her death. Elizabeth Short was found murdered in January of 1947. This is going to be a difficult case for me to cover. It is highly violent. It is highly graphic. There's so much media stuff that has been involved in that case. The media did dub her the Black Dahlia. There have been so many movies and documentaries on her, and it's still one of the most widely known and widely covered American murder mysteries that there are. Again, I'll have a whole other video on her. So I'm going to move on to 1962. 27-year-old Pauline Otten committed suicide by jumping out of the 9th story window. There's an actual other element to this. It has been said that she was married and was potentially in an abusive relationship with her husband, whether she was trying to leave him or not. Being in abusive relationships can just really affect your self-esteem, and it can hinder your ability to sort of see past the moment. When she jumped out of the window, however, she actually jumped and she landed on someone who was walking past. That was 65-year-old George Gianni. He was a transient that lived in the area, and when she landed on him, she killed him as well. That sort of hindered the investigation of what happened, because initially they thought that the deaths were related in terms of they knew each other and things like that, and it was discovered later that this was literally a fluke. Another really, really sad murder that occurred was in 1964. There was a retired phone operator, and her name was Goldie Osgood. She was known in the building as Pigeon Goldie because she liked to take care of the pigeons on the roof. She was a longtime resident. She was a lover of birds. She was really known to be very nice, and again, she was a longtime resident. This wasn't a transient person that nobody knew. She was found in her room brutally murdered. This 65-year-old woman had been raped, she had been stabbed, she had been beaten, her room was ransacked, and she was robbed. The person that was charged with her murder was 29-year-old Jacques Ellinger, I believe is that how you pronounce it. Although he was charged with her murder, he was later cleared, and no one's been charged since. On December 1st, 1967, 26-year-old Jeffrey Thomas Paley opened fire from the roof of the Hotel Cecil, down towards the street. No one was injured in this occurrence, but when he was arrested, it was interesting what his reason for doing it was. He claimed that the reason he did it was he wanted to bring to light an issue that had been going on, that people with mental illnesses could in fact get their hands on weapons extremely easily. He had spent time in a psychiatric hospital, and he obtained the weapon with no issue, and he said when he was shooting, he wasn't trying to hurt anybody, but he just wanted to show that, and it's interesting that this is 1976, because even currently now, we say all the time, with the different issues with gun violence, that, you have to do these background checks and things like that, but it's still so easy for people with mental illnesses, for children, for young people to get a hold of weapons. And this was something that he had claimed back in 1976, what honestly has really changed that much. Another case that I will be covering after the Elizabeth Short case is the case of Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. In 1985, the hotel. Some people say it's rumored, some people say it was confirmed, but it is believed widely that he lived in the hotel while he committed a majority of his murders. Ramirez was a regular presence on Skid Row, and he was also a professed Satanist. And I'll get into it in the video, but he had a history with different violent things prior to this, but it's the big night stalking killing spree where the media had dubbed it the Night Stalker. Those killings occurred during a period of time when he is believed to have lived at the Cecil Hotel. September 6th of 1988, there was a suspected murderer that was apprehended staying or hiding or living at the Cecil Hotel. On July 6, 1988, the body of 32-year-old nurse Terry Frances Gregg was found stabbed to death by her brother. He's the one that found her, and she was found in the house that she shared with her boyfriend, who was 28-year-old salesman Robert Sullivan. When they apprehended him, he was at the Cecil Hotel. They actually had another serial killer that stayed at the Cecil Hotel, and this is definitely confirmed. Austrian Jack Unterweger had traveled from Europe to Los Angeles specifically to stay in the Cecil Hotel. He came to write about crime and prostitution in LA. He was a journalist and committed murders while he stayed there. After the Richard Ramirez video, I will cover extensively this case. I had heard of this case a long time ago, and in researching it, there was so many other layers that were to this story. It just wasn't as black and white as it's sometimes portrayed to be. So I think that'll be a really interesting video. The other big case that happened there was the mysterious death of Elisa Lam. That occurred in January of 2013, so that is definitely more recent. That is definitely an entire video. If you've never heard of Elisa Lam, all you have to do is Google it. There are tons of conspiracy theories and videos on that topic, and once I finish the next 3, then Elisa it's already researched, it's already ready, and that will be the next one I film. If you like these types of videos, please give me a thumbs up. What sort of stories or thoughts do you have on the Cecil Hotel? Is this a case that you followed? Is there any details or different situations that I didn't mention that you could share with us? If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do so. I am so glad to have you. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.